If the heroes of the Marvel Universe were dropped into the world of DC, which villains would they end up fighting? Could they hold their own, and what would their clashes look like? I'm about to cover an entirely new batch of Marvel heroes, including the X-Men, Sentry, Daredevil, and more, and then break down who their new rogues gallery would be, as well as their arch-nemesis, and the nature of these new world-spanning rivalries. I did my best to find creative picks that will make you scratch your head at first, but totally make sense once you think about it. I'm really psyched to share my picks for Sentry. I think I absolutely cooked. In these matchups, we're assuming that there's no Justice League or Teen Titans to jump in and help. The heroes of the DC universe are all gone, entirely replaced by our Marvel heroes. They're completely on their own to acclimate to this new world and its villains. And if you think you've got better matchups or have better matchup videos featuring heroes and villains that you'd like to see instead, tell me down in those comments. But I am never making a video on Emma Frost versus Wonder Woman in a contest to see who can smash more watermelons with their thighs. So stop asking for that, Jeremy! Alright, let's do this. We're starting off with not just a hero, but a whole team. The X-Men are Marvel's mutant task force, fighting to save a world that hates and fears them. Led by the headstrong Cyclops with his optic beams, he's joined by telepath and telekinetic prodigy Jean Grey, the weather-manipulating Storm, genius and physical Marvel Beast, chain-smoking alcoholic ball of blades Wolverine, and a constantly rotating roster of other mutant heroes who are willing to heed the call. Guided by their founder and teacher, Charles Xavier, who established his school for gifted children to create a better world for mutant kind, the X-Men often find themselves saving the world from threats that target mutants or come from other mutants. Each member brings unique and versatile strengths to the team. Cyclops' tactical brilliance, Jean's psychic might, Logan's relentless grit, not to mention what they gain when joined by other members like Angel, Nightcrawler, Banshee, Iceman, Morph, Jubilee. They're like if a Swiss Army knife was a superhero team. In DC's world, they'd face villains who exploit fear, division, or raw power, challenging their unity and ideals. The X-Men's underdog spirit makes them perfect to tackle DC's oppressive forces, like my first pick, the Reach. This is an invading alien force and the source of the scarab technology used by Jaime Reyes, the Blue Beetle. An ancient insectoid civilization from deep space, outwardly they represent themselves as peaceful diplomats and traders, but beneath the facade, they're cunning imperialists who conquer planets through deception and subversion rather than outright war. The Reach use their scarabs to mind control hosts of their prey planets, building secret armies to dominate worlds across the stars, not unlike the Skrulls. They would absolutely infiltrate the X-Men, quietly taking over the powerful minds of heroes like Colossus or Storm, and only be discovered in a chance encounter where Professor X or Jean Grey detects them with Cerebro, since there's no Jaime in this world to sound the alarm. The Reach act like a hive mind, psychically connecting all their scarab pawns together to act as a conglomerate to dominate and oppress. It's such a cool contrast to how the X-Men represent embracing your individuality and fighting for freedom. And of course, the Reach would end up as a PR nightmare for the X-Men. Since the world of DC doesn't have a mutant population or any of the political implications that come from it, the Reach would be the reason they're despised by the public. Several of their members mind-controlled into attacking the Earth and helping the invasion force. Obviously, the fights would be awesome, Cyclops leading surgical strikes on their hidden bases, Jean countering their psychic control with her telepathy, and Storm frying scarab drones with lightning. I really like the Reach as an inciting force that makes the X-Men public enemies, something other villains would capitalize on in the future, which leads me to my next villain. Sersi, immortal sorceress wielding magic on par with the gods, she transforms her victims into beasts and bends minds with her spells. In a world without Wonder Woman, I can see the X-Men coming to the aid of Themyscira, one of the places most often the target of Sersi's hatred and rage towards the Olympians. Maybe after a particularly dangerous mission where the hateful public drove the team out of the United States, they ended up crash landing on Themyscira, amidst an attempt at a hostile takeover by Sersi. I can see a lot of fun interactions here, Jean clashing with Sersi's magical mind manipulation, and obviously several jokes about how she turns men into beasts while talking to Wolverine and Beast. Obviously, the Amazons would be very wary of Scott, Logan, and any other male members on the island, but I think they might actually ask Storm to stay with them once Sersi is defeated. It seems like the sort of place she would thrive. And the island of the Amazons, separate from man's world, is a lot like the mutant island nations of Genosha and later Krakoa. After this little adventure defeating Cersei, I can see the X-Men taking the idea and running with it, establishing their own Krakoa-like island in the DC world inspired by Themyscira. Finally, I think the greatest foe for the X-Men in the world of DC would be the Elite, a team of might-makes-right anti-heroes who originally clashed with Superman, led by the powerful telepath Manchester Black, a snarky British asshole who considers cynicism the ultimate truth. He works with heavy-hitter Coldcast, who can manipulate electromagnetic waves, shape-shifting monster woman Menagerie, and the wildcard magician Hat. The Elite are a force who wants to fix the world, not save it. They want to kill bad guys and bask in the glory, regardless of their influence on the greater world or who else they need to cut down to get there. In a world without Superman, I think it would be Professor X's unyielding idealism and belief in a better tomorrow that would draw Manchester Black's ire, and he'd decide the X-Men deserve to be killed like some of the public wants. The fights practically write themselves, Jean and Charles battling against Manchester Black's mental powers, while Storm and Wolverine are kept busy by Coldcast's electromagnetic control, Cyclops developing dozens of strategies on the fly to combat Hat's unpredictable magic bullshit, all while Beast tangles with Menagerie shifting into her various alien forms. And I think what's best about this matchup is that it would work as the X-Men's rehabilitation in the eyes of the people of Earth. After being manipulated by the Reach, their heroic spirit and ideals would finally get to shine here, compared to the nihilistic drivel spat out by the Elite. Defeating the Elite and protecting the nearby civilians when they inevitably crash out would finally get people to see how great the X-Men are, and remind people to never judge a book by its cover. From then, the Elite would serve as their greatest villains, forever bitter that the loser team not only beat them, but got them branded as criminals. But we're getting a little sappy here. How about someone who never cared about public perception and never will? Frank Castle, the Punisher, is Marvel's one-man war on crime. A former Marine, he uses his elite combat training, an arsenal of guns, and a relentless drive to punish criminals after his family's murder. No superpowers, just tactical genius and unbreakable will. Now, I can hear some comments already. This video is about Marvel heroes fighting DC villains, and yeah, Punisher isn't really a hero. He's an anti-hero at best, sometimes a straight-up villain, but there are just too many good matchups for him. And to be frank, pun intended, I just love the character, man. His stories are gritty, morally gray, pitting his brutal justice against mobsters, assassins, and psychos. In DC's world, he'd have plenty of places to hunt. Haunting criminals in Gotham's underworld, terrorists in Bialia, guerrilla warlords in Corto Maltese. Because Frank thinks of himself as cleaning up the world, we need to look to the dirt to pick his rogues gallery, criminals that prey on innocents that remind him of his family. I think if we want a garbage human who practically wears a big sign on his chest that says, "Please kill me, Punisher," we can do no better than Roman Sionis, the Black Mask. Gotham's sadistic crime lord, he runs his criminal empire of drug and human trafficking, all while wearing a mask carved from the wood of his father's coffin, the same father he killed himself along with his mother. Sionis is a sadist who hates that people don't act on their base instincts and wears societal masks to hide their true intentions from others. And his true intentions, other than controlling every detail of Gotham's crime to a freakishly small degree, he also loves to torture. He specifically delights in harming others to break their wills, relishing in the challenge and how powerful it makes him feel. He is complete gutter scum, the worst of the worst, and the perfect first hit for Frank as he sets foot in Gotham City, the White Skull taking on the Black Skull. Frank would target Black Mask's drug and weapon rackets, blowing up warehouses and interrogating goons with brutal efficiency. Black Mask's cruelty would definitely fuel Frank's rage, but Roman's resources, like hired metahumans, would keep him slippery and just out of reach. Black Mask is definitely evil enough to draw Frank's attention, and I can see him miscalculating, choosing to capture and torture Punisher once he thinks he's won, only for Frank to escape and choke the life out of him with his bare hands. And then that's that. He wouldn't make a good recurring villain or arch-nemesis because Frank would put him in the dirt and move on. As for a slightly longer-term punishing project, we have Intergang, a global crime syndicate with a continuous leg up on their criminal competition because they're secretly armed with hyper-advanced technology and weapons, all supplied by Apocalypse, homeworld of Darkseid. They're like half mafia, half alien cult, granted apocalyptian technology on only a few simple conditions: test the weapons out and destabilize society. Sow chaos and implicitly spread the ideals of anti-life as they steal, traffic, destroy, and manipulate. Led by the insane, cannibalistic Bruno Mannheim, Intergang uses energy rifles, force fields, and mother boxes to commit their atrocities. Intergang usually runs into Superman and occasionally have their terror plots overturned by the Question. But without these DC heroes, it would be up to the Punisher to pick up on their plans and put a stop to them. Frank would see Intergang as a cancer, corrupting cities with high-tech arms deals. He'd go full Rambo, infiltrating bases and turning their Darkseid blasters against them, eventually co-opting some of the technology to use as he participates in their arm race. Their fights would be a gritty war with Frank outgunned but outsmarting them, maybe sniping their leaders from a mile out or planting explosive traps where they gather for their creepy occult ceremonies. And of course, Frank would cook up a gruesome end for Bruno Mannheim, saving the people who were about to become his dinner in the process. But Intergang is huge, a major threat. They would keep Frank busy for his whole life, but he's never toppling them, and they don't offer a personal vendetta that we need for an arch-enemy. For that, we need to go back to Gotham. If Frank is all about cleaning up the streets, what could be dirtier than a millionaire crime boss turned money-laundering casino nightclub owner turned sleazeball politician? That's right, we are talking about Oswald Cobblepot, the legitimate businessman who runs Gotham's Iceberg Lounge while secretly controlling its black market as the Penguin. He runs every crime imaginable under the guise of a legitimate corporation, his polished facade hiding ruthless ambition. The Penguin has fed a live man to a swarm of genetically altered carnivorous penguins. He's tortured his enemies in a gladiator arena beneath the Iceberg Lounge, burned and buried people alive, and was even willing to murder a baby if it meant hurting one of his criminal rivals. The Punisher would catch one whiff of Penguin and go on a rampage, but there's a catch. Penguin is slimy, and he's devised a carefully crafted defense using bribery, blackmail, and human shields. According to the city of Gotham, he's legally in the clear and even leveraged police protection in the past. He's held the seat of mayor, and when he's inside his lounge, he's surrounded by very squishy, semi-innocent civilians. Not only would Cobblepot make it nearly impossible for Frank to kill him, but he would frame Punisher as a terrorist, using his wealth and connections to sick cops and assassins like Killer Croc onto him. I can see Frank crashing into a high society gala to confront Oswald, only to face a hired metahuman ambush instead, the lives of innocents used as chess pieces to force him to capitulate. Penguin's ability to hide behind legitimate business and manipulate Gotham's legal system is exactly why Frank needs to kill him, but also why it would be so difficult to do so. I can see these two clashing for years, until Frank finally manages to get the upper hand and gut that bird like a fish. But while Punisher is letting bullets fly, somebody needs to keep things light. Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, is Jersey City's stretchy superhero. A Pakistani-American teen, she gained polymorphing powers from Terrigen Mist that activated her inhuman DNA. Or maybe she's been retconned into a mutant now for MCU synergy, I guess? Whatever, who knows. The point is, her powers let her shapeshift into almost any appearance, stretch her body like Mr. Fantastic to grow and shrink, and even heal herself by returning to her original shape. A Captain Marvel fangirl, Kamala's heart, optimistic, brave, and tied to her community, drives her heroic decisions. Her stories are usually a mix of teen drama with quirky villain fights, balancing school, family, and saving the day. In DC's world, I had to give it some thought. Would she protect Metropolis, Gotham, Central City, somewhere else? I think she's probably most likely to live in Metropolis, but definitely clash with some Gotham villains when they saunter on over to her part of town. The most important thing is that she would face foes who challenge her creativity and spirit. Kamala's empathy and never give up attitude would shine, but her inexperience means that she'll need to outsmart her foes who exploit her youth or test her limits. Now, an important thing to know about Kamala is that when she first debuted, her entire character arc was all about her idolization of Carol Danvers, and learning to love herself in all of her uniqueness instead of trying to emulate her hero. That's why I think the villain she fights in her debut couldn't be anyone other than Clayface. Basil Carlo, the shape-shifting monstrous pile of mud, is a former actor turned into a blob, with the ability to morph into anyone or anything. Clayface is often hired by other crime lords to infiltrate and replace key individuals, using his mimicry powers and acting skills to pass himself off as anyone. But the thing is, he loved his time as an actor embodying various characters, and now when he changes into other people, he risks his psyche fracturing, losing himself in the new persona and becoming that which he tries to emulate. I think Carlo would make a perfect first villain for Kamala, maybe performing a string of bank robberies by turning into a popular and well-respected venture capitalist, a Mark Cuban type guy. Meanwhile, Miss Marvel would be beginning her crime-fighting journey by shapeshifting into Captain Marvel when she goes on patrol. She figures him out, but is confronted with her own feelings when she realizes that Carlo chose to become someone else this time because of how much he hates himself. I think that fighting Clayface would be Kamala's trigger to start looking like herself as she swings around Metropolis. Plus, it would be super fun to see her embiggening powers clash with Carlo's goofy shapeshifting. And he'd definitely be a recurring villain, returning over time as various members of her community, always with a new grift. But once Kamala comes to terms with herself, her next big challenge will be proving herself in the eyes of the public. Something that will be made especially difficult by her next villain, Livewire. Initially a shock jock radio host, Leslie Willis was transformed into an electrically powered supervillain with a chip on her shoulder. Livewire was originally one of Superman's biggest critics, but in a world without him, I can see her zeroing in on Miss Marvel as a naive goody two-shoes in over her head that she would berate and slander on her show at any given opportunity. I really think that these two would have an antagonistic relationship, just like Spider-Man and J. Jonah Jameson, which would be kicked up about 100 notches once Willis is transformed into Livewire, finally given the physical power to tear down everyone who ever made her shitless. Kamala would need to be careful and make tough decisions, using her shrinking to avoid shocks or choosing to grow big and absorb blasts to protect citizens with the full knowledge that she'll have to revert back to normal in order to heal. I think the only way Miss Marvel would come out on top is through outsmarting Livewire, finding the very small group of people she actually does respect and transforming into one of them long enough to lead the electric villain into a trap. After which, of course, Livewire would be absolutely livid and make it her personal life mission to tear down Miss Marvel, a challenge Kamala would excitedly embrace. But for her arch enemy, I'm gonna be honest, Miss Marvel is such a friendly neighborhood type character, second only to Spider-Man in that regard. I think her most recurring villain wouldn't be one she hates or that rips her life apart, but instead somebody that inspires her to be kinder. Kite Man. Chuck Brown is a perpetual screw-up inventor with a can-do attitude who was unwillingly co-opted into the War of Jokes and Riddles, a turf war between the Joker and Riddler, to build weapons. The Riddler coerced him into helping by poisoning Chuck's son, and after his death, Chuck gave up all semblance of a normal life, instead using his inventions to become the villain Kite Man, gliding about on a giant kite and using kite-based weapons and tools to perform robberies. I can see him leaving Gotham as a part of his new life as Kite Man, choosing to steal from Metropolis instead. The thing about Kite Man is that he's not very good at stealing things, and doesn't even want to hurt anybody, but he's good at making inventions, and stubbornly chooses to follow this path he's chosen, the one part of his life that he can control. I can see Kamala thwarting his petty crime attempts a handful of times before eventually stopping to chat with him, and the two striking up an unlikely friendship and respectful rivalry. After enough time, I can see Chuck using his engineering degree to help Kamala with her AP science homework or to draft a college application essay, while talking to her reminds him of the time he spent with his son before he was taken away by the Riddler. Although it's atypical, I think Miss Marvel would very proudly declare that Kite Man was her arch-nemesis to anyone who will hear, because she knows how happy it would make Chuck to hear that. Hell yeah. Next up, we have the Fist of Khonshu, Moon Knight. Mark Spector was a mercenary who was betrayed and left for dead in the Egyptian desert. He collapsed at the foot of a statue of Khonshu, the Egyptian god of the moon and vengeance. Miraculously revived, Mark believed Khonshu had resurrected him in exchange for becoming his earthly avatar, a servant of divine justice, waging war on evil in all of its forms. But his new life of servitude and vengeance was a little more complicated, because Mark wasn't the only one including in the pact with the moon god. Because of his dissociative identity identity disorder, Mark actually has multiple personalities, including the suave billionaire businessman Stephen Grant and the streetwise informant and cab driver Jake Lockley. In the MCU, they changed quite a bit about Moon Knight, drastically altering Stephen's personality and adding a bunch of powers. But outside of special exceptions, comics Moon Knight is mostly just a normal hand-to-hand combatant with a few gadgets, although he is extremely dangerous due to how reckless he tends to fight, usually choosing not to dodge or block in order to more efficiently dish out damage, which also happens to be how I play all video games. The point is, Mark is crazy, and I'm not talking about his alters. He's usually strung out, sleep-deprived, violent and unhinged, and babbling to his hallucinations. He wears a suit of all white for anti-camouflage. He wants his enemies to know he's coming and to be afraid. Moon Knight's stories are best when he's filled with internal strife, either struggling in his belief that Khonshu is actually real and he's not hallucinating, balancing his very fragile mental health with his eternal mission of vengeance, and trying to foster peace when his alters all want something different. Knowing that, I have some fantastic picks for DC villain. First up, John Dee, better known as Dr. Destiny. Originally a genius scientist who created devices to manipulate dreams, over time his body and mind were warped by his obsession with power and the dream realm. He eventually had a run-in with Morpheus, also known as Dream, one of the 7 endless entities that govern all of reality, where he obtained the Dream Stone. With this powerful relic, he can manipulate reality to craft false, illusory worlds, control people's minds, enter their dreams, and drive them to madness. Much like Moon Knight, he basically never sleeps. After breaking down the barrier of the dreaming, he exists in a perpetual state between waking and sleeping. But unlike Mark, Dr. Destiny relishes in it. He loves to manipulate the minds of others, slowly breaking them for his own amusement. I can see him easily coming into Khonshu's crosshairs, his sadistic actions deserving of vengeance. And of course, Mark, Stephen, and Jake would be practically torn apart at the seams as they try to topple the villain, thrown into a dream world where they can meet and interact with one another, forced to battle phantom versions of himself, eventually brought to his knees through the increasing pressure of Destiny's tricks. And I think the only way Moon Knight would come out on top is by unleashing a hidden trick only Khonshu was aware of until this point, the secret 4th personality, Mr. Knight, who ruthlessly and efficiently pushes past the illusions to put down Destiny for good, leaving the rest of Moon Knight's system in the dark as to what just happened, and distrusting Khonshu all the more. Next up, I can definitely see Mark clashing with someone who drives a wedge further between him and Khonshu, Brother Blood. Psychotic cult leader and high priest of the Church of Blood, this Teen Titans villain is a charismatic master manipulator who uses religious dogma to control thousands of followers, and has even overtaken entire nations with his influence before. Brother Blood performs all sorts of dark rituals involving necromancy and blood magic to grant himself immortality and psychic control. He's often attempted to kidnap Raven to access some of Trigon's power through her bloodline connection, but I can see him being thwarted by Moon Knight and turning his attention to Khonshu, developing arcane rituals and sealing dark blood pacts to steal away power from the Moon God. All the while, Mark struggles with the fact that his loved ones are manipulated into joining the Church of Blood, while he wrestles with the fact that they're following of a harsh spiritual leader who doesn't care about them. It looks just like his own relationship with Khonshu, to the point where he questions his dedication so much that he makes a rash decision. I believe Moon Knight's ultimate villain would be DC's own Spirit of Vengeance, the Spectre. A sliver of the true god of everything, the Presence, the Spectre would see Moon Knight's vigilante killings as a challenge to his authority, and recognize Jake Lockley's willingness to do what Mark and Stephen won't, and offer him the position of Spectre, to serve as the divine wrath of God. Jake, convinced by the events of their battle with Brother Blood how cold and unreliable Khonshu could be, would accept the offer. He would become cosmic punishment given form, acting as both judge and executioner for the most evil souls in existence. Spectre can manipulate time, space, and reality to punish those who are most deserving of the wrath of God. And yet, Mark and Stephen would remain loyal as Moon Knight. Immediately, the entire system is thrown into chaos, dedicated to 2 different gods of vengeance. Spectre easily outranks Khonshu in power, but he's limited by only possessing a portion of their soul, and seeing his only soldier being stolen from beneath beneath his nose, Khonshu would channel more of his power into Moon Knight to combat the Spectre's influence. Now, I need to pause for a moment because I'm sure some of you are typing up already that Spectre isn't even a villain. And that's right, he is not evil, but he does represent the extreme end of what Khonshu is, and in that way, he's a personal villain for Mark, Steven, and Jake. Between the three, Mark struggles the most with the idea of balancing mercy against vengeance. That's an idea that Khonshu will occasionally tolerate, but the Spectre never wavers. His judgment is final and forever. Not to mention how Steven's cold and wealthy persona reflects their need for control, while the endless power of the Spectre gives them more control than is healthy. I think it would take spending some time as Vengeance itself to recognize that the more controlled outings as Moon Knight are all these three can tolerate while holding on to their humanity, the final step in their acceptance of the position as Khonshu's right hand. And come on, Mark Spectre versus the Spectre? How could I not put these two together? And how could you watch this far into the video without liking and subscribing? I know you want to. I got Sentry, Black Panther, and Daredevil coming up next. You telling me that's not worth tickling that little like button, maybe giving that bell a little ring? Or if you're feeling really cheeky, you can join my channel membership, where you get to see these videos weeks earlier than everyone else, and even watch exclusive video content I will never share. Pretty tempting, huh? I thought so. Okay, time to move on. The Sentry is one of Marvel's most powerful and most psychologically unstable superheroes. Often described as Marvel's Superman with a twist, he is a godlike being of light, constantly at war with a dark force inside himself known as the Void. This internal conflict defines everything about him: his power, his morality, and his terrifying unpredictability. Robert Reynolds goes by Bob, and is the golden guardian of good, with the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns that he got from an experimental serum. Probably. See, the Sentry is so powerful that he may or may not have retconned his own origin story a few times. Sort of like when he worked with other Marvel heroes to make the entire world forget that he ever existed, including himself, in order to protect everyone from the Void breaking out again. The entire history of his existence was slowly remembered in an era-accurate 1960s comic book paneled memory, as if Sentry was actually created decades earlier than his debut in the 2000s. It's very trippy to experience as a reader. I know we just explored mental illness with Moon Knight, but honestly, Sentry is not much better. His stories usually involve unreliable narrators and world-altering revelations trapped inside the secret corners of Bob's mind. He doesn't really have villains in the traditional sense. Most of his stories have him included as a wild card amongst bigger team-up events, or have him tackling the Void, the dark other half of his psyche that exists only to break people's minds and spread despair. So when we drop Bob into the world of DC, picking out enemies for him was difficult, but I think I cracked it. First, someone to challenge his incredible powers directly: Mr. Mind. This telepathic little caterpillar in a pair of librarian glasses, who was originally the enemy of another Superman-adjacent hero, Shazam. Mr. Mind is a Venusian worm, a type of alien parasite with a nearly unparalleled level of hyper-intelligence, telepathy, mind control, and mental projection powers. He'll often wiggle his little green ass inside your ear to take over your body and use you to help work out his evil plans, usually involving planetary invasion and psychic domination. I think Mr. Mind is the exact kind of goofy comic book villain that would have fought the 1960s version of Sentry from his erased memories, and after clashing in the past, Mr. Mind would be the catalyst for Sentry eventually remembering his alter ego. Let me introduce you to the worm's evolved form, Hyperfly. Like a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly, Mr. Mind assumes this hyperfly form and becomes a chronal predator, a being that feeds on entire timelines, eating continuity and creating paradoxes. He is the perfect threat for a superhero who retconned his own past, a monster that retcons everything else. I think Bob would need to willingly choose to accept his past as the Sentry in order to stop Mr. Mind from destroying reality, obliterating the multiverse parasite in a blaze of golden light, but unknowingly unleashing the Void in the process, which leads me to my second villain pick. Nekron, Lord of the Black Lantern, seeks death's dominion. The emotional embodiment of death in the DC universe, he is a cosmic Grim Reaper. He establishes the Black Lantern Corps, prophesied by his servant Black Hand, real name William Hand, an insane necrophiliac freak that believes death is purity and life is a disease. Black Hand leads the Black Lanterns for Necron, with the goal of erasing all life from existence by transforming the dead and those who have died in the past into zombie Black Lanterns that obliterated the other colors of the emotional spectrum. I believe that Necron, who chose Black Hand as his emissary, would become fixated on the Void and try to co-opt it and grant its power to Black Hand. See, the Void is incredibly powerful and also desires to destroy and spread hopelessness everywhere. It wouldn't be difficult to twist that desire towards death. And unfortunately, this is something that Sentry wouldn't be aware of when he goes to stop Necron's zombie armies. The Void would be drawn out of him and offered the chance to join the Black Lantern Corps. But the Void would refuse. And this is important, I think Sentry would lose this fight badly. The revelation of the Void would drive him to near insanity, and he would be unable to prevent the Black Lantern assault, instead fleeing while he battles with himself to contain the destructive force of the Void, while other Marvel heroes, probably Silver Surfer, would be tasked with discovering the white light of life to defeat Necron. This, of course, leads us to the Sentry's greatest villain and arch-enemy, the Void. But who would set the stage for this battle? Enter Dr. Hugo Strange, genius Gotham psychologist and resident at Arkham Asylum. I think that Bob would check himself into Arkham in the hopes that he can find a way to finally defeat the Void for good, where he'd unfortunately come under the care of Hugo Strange. The Doctor would attempt to fix Bob's fractured mind, only to stumble onto the truth of his existence as both the Sentry and the Void, and set his sights on manipulating the Void to achieve his own ends. Strange would carefully craft his therapy sessions and mind-altering technology to probe at Bob's mind, playing with his manic-depressive tendencies to shape the broken man into a weapon. But beneath the surface, Bob's psyche couldn't take the pressure and eventually crumbles, leading Bob to the realization that he actually likes being the Void. The split between the two alter egos would evaporate, leading to the merged Sentry. Now, without any hint of inner conflict, his conscience and desires perfectly in sync, he becomes a godlike being of total certainty. He immediately obliterates Hugo Strange from existence, turns his full force of power to wiping away Necron from every corner of reality, then ascends beyond the earthly realm to take his place as a being of cosmic influence, creating and destroying on a whim. In this state, he's like a completely detached, wandering force of nature, but at least he's finally at peace. Okay, let's bring things back down to Earth, more specifically Central Africa. T'Challa, the Black Panther, is Wakanda's king and protector. He's physically enhanced by the magical heart-shaped herb, granting superhuman strength, speed, agility, and heightened senses. As Grand Regent of Wakanda, he has access to their prized metal, vibranium, which has special properties of absorbing and redirecting energy. His suit is made from a vibranium weave, nearly impenetrable with deadly claws and throwing knives. He pairs all of this with a genius intellect in both science and magic. He's a warrior king with a master of diplomacy, combat, and mysticism. His stories balance defending Wakanda's sovereignty with tackling global threats, and facing rivals who covet his nation's resources or challenge his leadership. What makes Black Panther an interesting hero to drop into DC's Earth is that there is no Wakanda here. But I did let wealthy characters like Moon Knight and Iron Man keep their giant companies. Check out my original video where I went over Iron Man and other Marvel characters right here. So I think it would only be fair to let T'Challa keep his nation, which isn't too difficult as Wakanda was extremely isolationist and secretive for most of their history. So I don't think I need to figure out how they deal with historical threats like Ra's al Ghul or Vandal Savage. Instead, I'll be looking at the villains T'Challa will be fighting in the present day. First up, British archaeologist Barbara Minerva, who would be a very excited ambassador to Wakanda and strike up a strong friendship with T'Challa due to her interest in their religion and culture, specifically how the Wakandan royal family is said to be blessed by the Panther god Bast. T'Challa would appreciate her curiosity and reverence for his culture and encourage her to continue learning throughout the world, unknowingly sending Minerva down a dark path. As she sets out on a separate expedition to explore a more remote tribe that worships a cheetah god, she chooses to undergo a blood ritual in an attempt to achieve immortality, to spend the rest of eternity learning about the world. But because she's deemed unworthy, the god curses her, transforming her body into the monstrous cheetah. Now stuck in this form, Minerva develops a deep-seated grudge against Wakanda and T'Challa personally. Why was his family blessed by the gods while she was cursed? I think Cheetah almost makes a better villain for Black Panther than Wonder Woman. Both have supernatural powers from African cat gods, she's got a built-in reason to be envious and hate the Wakandans, and their fights would be absolutely awesome, with T'Challa left melancholy after defeating Cheetah. Was he wrong to be so open in sharing his culture? Is the pursuit of knowledge a foolish endeavor? I think this would really open up the philosophical, insightful aspects of the character, which is where some of his best stuff happens. But for a less personal and more national threat, we have his next villain, Brother Eye. One of the most terrifying pieces of technology in the DC universe, a sentient, orbiting AI surveillance system that evolves into a cold fascist nightmare. Originally created to protect humanity, Brother Eye eventually turns against it, seeing freedom, emotion, and individuality as threats to its order. Originally created by Batman, I can see this version mostly crafted by T'Challa, perhaps with some input from Reed Richards and Tony Stark, with the goal of creating a global threat detection system to defend Wakanda. However, the incredible technology is discovered and hacked by Maxwell Lord, reusing the incredible superintelligence to detect metahuman threats all over the globe and predict their future actions, all under the directive of preventing potential dangers. But the AI goes out of control, deeming all metahumans threats and using its OMAC drones to co-opt innocent humans into a cyborg army to subjugate them all. T'Challa would be stuck with a battle on two fronts, working to take down Brother Eye's servers while leading his soldiers against the waves of cyborgs, and dealing with the political backlash from other world leaders and his own people once it's revealed that this new global threat is his brainchild. I think T'Challa would be able to outsmart Brother Eye and destroy all the satellites, but it would leave Wakanda in a precarious state with few global allies, which allows for his next villain to strike. Ocean Master, brother of Aquaman and Prince of Atlantis, would definitely covet Wakanda's resources of vibranium to use for his war on the surface world. I think after the African nation is ravaged by Brother Eye, Orm would take the opportunity to strike while they're vulnerable. Orm's entire thing is about his blood right to rule over Atlantis and his imperialist tendencies against the surface dwellers he sees as nothing more than pollutants of the ocean. And because there's no Aquaman in this world to put Orm in his place, he'd likely unite the Seven Seas together in a gigantic military force. It would be up to T'Challa to not only defend his homeland, but repair his relationship with the other nations of the world to help defend the surface. He'd need to garner the help of Themyscira, probably making risky decisions to trade away some of his precious vibranium in order to assure the greater world's safety. It would be a fantastic opportunity to explore the sorts of ideas a government leader has to face. How do you balance your people's interest with those of the rest of the world? Is it better to crush your enemies or offer them mercy? And of course, Orm's Atlantean strength and magic trident would be enough to pierce T'Challa's vibranium armor, making him an incredible physical threat in addition to a political rival. I think Orm would end up blaming T'Challa for organizing the surface world to beat him back into the waters, and make it his personal mission to tear Wakanda to pieces the very first moment their vigilant leader blinks. But we've discussed enough big topics for today, from godhood to adolescence to national sovereignty. I think it's only right that we finish off with something simple. One man, a pair of bloody fists, a quiet piety, and a devilish drive to punish evil. Matt Murdock is Daredevil, Hell's Kitchen's blind vigilante, gifted with enhanced senses and a radar-like perception that make him a street-level powerhouse. A mostly pro bono lawyer by day, his Catholic guilt and martial arts training drive his relentless fight against crime. Matt's stories are all about what it means to be a man against the world. Beaten down by evil, you're back to the ropes as you struggle to bring some light to those around you, desperately clinging to your faith. Daredevil's powers are very simple. His radar sense gives him excellent perception, but that's it. Everything else he does with guts and grit. He doesn't even have the cushion of cash, like DC heroes Batman or Green Arrow, so no fancy gadgets or vehicles, just his billy clubs. That said, Matt is a beast, and I think he'd be a really good pairing for a lot of the street-level crime you see from DC. He'd definitely be situated in Gotham City instead of his traditional home of Hell's Kitchen, with the occasional stories taking place in Metropolis and Star City when he has to travel for a court case. And he'd absolutely end up befriending Commissioner Gordon, perhaps even crafting a sky signal with his double D symbol instead of the iconic bat. First up, I can see them running into each other while Matt is on the road in Star City, Onomatopoeia, a masked serial killer who targets non-powered superheroes and speaks only in sound effects. I'd love to give you an insight into Onomatopoeia's backstory and motivations, but we actually don't know. He's a disturbingly intelligent and methodical killer, tracking down heroes and executing them with unmatched efficiency, only ever uttering the sounds objects make as he uses them. Click as he cocks a gun, thwack when he smacks someone in the skull with a wrench. He's an expert martial artist and tactical savant. With expertise in almost every kind of weapon, he often improvises materials laying around as extremely efficient killing tools. Now, of course, I originally thought that Count Vertigo would make a great villain for Daredevil, using sound waves to disorient Matt's radar senses and leave him defenseless, but I think Onomatopoeia is a much cooler matchup. The blind guy with super hearing fights a purposely silent serial killer who willingly makes noises to let people know where he is just to scare them more. Plus, he doesn't have any powers, but is a good enough fighter to tangle with both Green Arrow and Batman, so he'd scrap with Daredevil in some of the coolest fights you can imagine. Matt's radar sense and Onomatopoeia's improvised weapons, each making perfect use of their environments to get a leg up on the other. And I don't think Matt would ever actually catch him and figure out his identity, leaving a perfect, terrifying question mark hanging over his head for countless nights to come. I said in my previous video that Spider-Man wouldn't be a good matchup for the Joker because he's too lighthearted and quippy, but Matt? Oh my god, in the right broody mood, he can seem even more tortured than Batman, and the Joker would zero in on him immediately, along with his very conspicuous no-kill rule. I can see Daredevil swinging in to stop one of Joker's terror plots, maybe when he fills the Gotham River with laughing gas or kidnaps Commissioner Gordon, only to take a hostage in an attempt to get away. Matt manages to bounce a billy club and knock Joker in the back of the head, save the hostage, and the Joker's vendetta begins here. It would only escalate when he actually manages to kill someone in front of Matt, and he sees how much that enrages him, Daredevil beating Joker to a pulp, but refusing to kill him. From there, the Clown Prince of Crime would see Matt's unshakable morality as a toy to break, unleashing chaotic schemes with the intent of killing and maiming as many as possible, trying to get him to crack under the pressure. He would bomb City Hall, sink ships full of fishermen, unleash mutant hyenas into the streets, every attempt a new plan to drag Matt into giving up, and Matt would definitely let it slip to the Joker that he is a believer in God, inspiring Joker to put him in an impossible scenario where he must choose to kill or see a church full of innocents go up in flames. But at the end of the day, Matt's faith is too strong, and his love of life would outshine Joker's evil ultimatums, clinging to hope even amidst the clown's acts of terror. And eventually, it would take a while, but eventually, Joker would grow bored of him. Joker is unhinged, and he's definitely scary, but Daredevil is the man without fear, right? His greatest enemy needs to be the one man who can challenge that title, Scarecrow. Jonathan Crane is a former Gotham professor of psychology who's been obsessed with the effect of fear on the human psyche ever since his intense bullying as a child. In adulthood, he developed an experimental fear toxin, a noxious gas that causes everyone who inhales it to hallucinate their greatest fears. Realizing the incredible power in his hands, he chose to become a supervillain, spreading his toxin wherever he could to induce as much fear as possible. Over the years, Crane has inhaled so much of his own fear toxin that he's become immune to it, as well as the emotion himself. He literally is a man without fear. I think after hearing the newspapers call Daredevil by that moniker, Scarecrow would make it his personal mission to find and break him, proving that no one is above the all-encompassing grip of fear. And when he does finally manage to catch Daredevil and spray him with a blast of fear toxin, what would that reaction look like? Other characters can close their eyes to shut out the visual hallucinations, but Matt's incredible senses would be overloaded, haunted with terrifying screams and putrid smells, an inescapable onslaught from all directions that he can't shut off. I think after experiencing that, Matt would have to reach down deep, clutching tightly to his faith in Christ, his belief that all he experiences, no matter how terrible, is ultimately a brief detour in God's grand plan, to steel himself and choose to face Scarecrow once more. I really think this would be a monumental experience for Matt Murdock, and after coming through the other side, he would finally accept the title people have been calling him for years. The Man Without Fear. Stay frosty.